Good afternoon and welcome to my podcast, You're Stronger Than You Think, with my guest, Vicky Poole. I'm so excited to have her today. And we met not very long ago in an online Facebook group. I feel like we're doing online dating and it's really cool.
I know.
I'm going to have Vicky. Vicky, could you just introduce yourself a little bit? Tell us a little bit about yourself. Let's
Sure.
know you a
I
little bit.
am a natural Georgia peach. I was born in Georgia. I still live in Georgia, and I have lived other places, sporadically, but still basically not far from where I was raised. And so the name of my business is the Enlightened Peach, and part of that's because I am a Georgia peach.
I love
And I became a coach about probably close to 7 years ago. And the reason I became a coach was because I had been a yo-yo dieter my whole life, my entire life, and kept losing the weight, then getting bigger than I was before. And that was this perpetual thing that I finally got to this place. I said, oh my gosh, I've either got to decide that it's okay being fat or I've got to do something different. But
it.
I kept thinking, I've done something different so many times and I keep ending up here. So how do I fix this? So
Yeah.
this one I started on a search and I discovered health coaching. And I found a health coaching school that they specialized in habit change. And I thought, that's what I need.
Yeah.
So I thought, it was quite expensive for me at the time, especially. And I said, well, I'm going to go ahead and do this. Even if it only helps me, it'll be money well spent. And then maybe somehow I'll help others. And that's how my journey began. And then I became a life coach and a master transformational coach. And then as I was really diving in even further on this journey, I realized that sometimes I could feel myself slipping back into some old habits, even though I had done all these other things. And I thought, okay, there's got to be one more piece that I'm missing. And that's when I decided to dive into hypnosis. So I've got five hypnosis certifications, and I'm actually currently studying for one more because they're all just a little bit different. And so you're probably like me. I learn from all these different platforms, and then I pull out the bits and the pieces that feel like me, and then I do my own thing, right? So when I work with a client, I don't just sit down and say, oh, you want to lose weight? Okay, bam, here's my lose weight script. Let's talk. And 30 minutes later, wham, bam, thank you, ma'am, we're done, right? It's a long process. My first session especially is like 2 hours because
Wow.
we really dive into why all this is happening and your past and all these different things. And then I create a script just for you. And then we do the hypnosis. And it's so profound. And like Stacy, you know her. I've done hypnosis with her, and she just says it's magical. It's magical. And so it can
Awesome.
be very magical. Um, I am oh gosh, I hate to say this. I am a senior citizen. I'm just about to hit 65 in September. And so
Almost happy
it's,
birthday.
well, thank you. Not too quick now. Let's keep it at bay a little bit longer. But I don't feel like 65 anyway. But I say that because one of the things that I've discovered over all of this 7 years of doing all these things is that it feels like, I know time's an illusion, but let's face it. Theoretically, if you're 30, you've got 50 years left, right? But
Yeah,
if you're 50, you might only have 30 years left. So
gotcha.
it changes your perspective of time.
Yeah,
Now, not to say that everybody's going to hit that 80 stage. Some people die sooner and all that stuff. But it started making me, I started feeling as if, you know, um, the time I spent on things was so much more valuable that I didn't want to spend time on things that weren't important to me.
awesome.
And I really started being so much more mindful of that thing because time is more elusive now than it ever was before.
Yeah,
So I guess
excellent.
that's kind of me.
I like it. There are a couple of things that you said that really stood out to me. So I took some notes and I wanted to
Okay.
ask you a couple of questions if that's okay.
Yeah.
Um, and I also really want to ask you, actually, I'm not gonna do that yet. I'm gonna ask you the question you asked me on your podcast. What is
Okay.
your favorite childhood memory? I loved that question.
Okay. Well, my favorite childhood memory is actually my father used to keep my sister and myself when we were young on Saturdays.
Okay.
And he would take us a lot of the time to these little carnival fair things. And, as a child, it might have only happened a couple of times, but in my mind, it's this big thing, right?
Right.
And we would walk around and we would talk and we would go ride the rides, and it was just magical. And so it's being with him on Saturdays, because sometimes we thought it was magical that we would stop at the gas station, and for lunch, he'd let us get a Hostess apple pie and a Coke. My mom would have been mortified had she known that's what we were having for lunch. But
Right.
so as I'm saying these things, I'm thinking maybe I didn't really get to spend a whole lot of time with him. So
Yeah.
those times were big, right? And one of my other memories of him on Saturdays, it's always on a
On
Saturday, right?
Saturday. Yeah.
My mom was a hairstylist, and she was working on Saturdays. Later on, he became a hairstylist as well, but
Oh,
before
interesting.
he was, like, Saturdays was when we got to sit and have a grilled cheese and tomato soup. It was like there was certain things that just,
Yeah.
yeah. So that's my fondest memories when I was little.
That's fun. That's interesting. I wonder if part of you were talking about the yo-yo dieting. I wonder if part of that was just that association with, you
Yeah,
know, the comfort of these yummy treats with love and dad. So that's really interesting. Those are cool
yeah,
memories. I like it.
yeah, yeah,
I can feel it. Like your description made, I was there. I could taste it. I could feel it. It was cozy. It was amazing.
yeah.
So one of the things that you said was you bought this program that was really expensive for you at the time. So why did you invest in something that was really expensive?
Because I was desperate. I either, like I
Okay.
said, I had to either say, okay, I'm going to be fat for the rest of my life and I'm going to be at peace with that, because I couldn't stay in this turmoil place anymore
Okay.
of hating myself because I was fat, taking it to heart when somebody said something, feeling like such a loser. So many times I heard things like that I was fat and lazy, you
Mm,
know, certain things like that would really, really, integrate. And I didn't like it. So it was like if I was at peace with being fat, then maybe the things people said wouldn't hurt me.
okay.
So it was either be okay with it or make a change. And this was the desperate change that I felt like this is going to work. And maybe that's why it did, was
Yeah.
because I was so in this place of it's do or die,
Yeah. 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 It's interesting the things that you were calling yourself. And this is one of the things I really love to point out to people. And maybe you've already thought of this. And if you have, then we're just going to reiterate this. But often we make the change when we are the fat, lazy losers. That's the person who got you to where you are. And
Yeah.
often we remember things differently, thinking, oh, well, now that I'm more confident and I'm not as fat and I'm not as lazy and I'm not a loser, obviously I made that change, but that wasn't who made the change. The person who made the change, was the one who was scared to make the change. And so
Yeah.
I, I
And
just, yeah, go ahead.
well, I was going to say it's funny because you know this about me, that I have this amazing Facebook group, Stand Up and Stand Out.
Mhm.
And this morning I actually was live in the group, and one of the things that I was talking about was that the fact that I was sitting in front of them today, talking to them about affirmations and journal prompts and loving on them every single day, was because I was that fat, lazy person. That if I had not been, I probably would not have grown to being right here, right now. And
Yeah.
so it's like I say thank you all the time for her and all the shit, pardon
Yeah.
me, that
That's
she
okay.
went through,
Yeah.
because it made me who I am. And that's why, in my podcast, I talk about our mosaic life, because
Mhm.
it's all those pieces of our life that make us who we are. And some of them are horrible things, some of
Yeah.
them are not so horrible. But the one thing I like to always tell people is if it's happening to you, it's horrible, whether it's small to somebody else or big.
Absolutely.
What we're dealing with is big to us.
Absolutely.
And sometimes I think we forget that, because we'll say, well, their problem wasn't as big as my problem. It's almost like we're in competition. Well, who was the worse off kind of thing.
Yeah.
And it's
Yeah. It's
like,
very
hey,
true.
I'll give it to you. It was terrible for you. Fine. And just let it be.
Yeah. Awesome. I'm so glad that you look back at her and you're thankful for her. That's something I like to
Yeah.
help people to do as well, because they get so frustrated when they're in that state of, we'll just keep referring to the fat, lazy loser state, because
Hmm.
I think it's easy for most people to remember a time, either when or now, that they have had those feelings. And that is usually the person who is brave. Like when you're feeling the downest, the most
Yeah.
down, the worstest, that's when you make that change, that do or die.
Yeah.
And then you do have that hero's journey. That's our favorite part in the movie, isn't it? Where like
Yeah.
we can we can see the person and we're like, oh my gosh, I am you. And then we watch them, you know, have this light bulb, and then suddenly there's a change and we're like, oh my gosh, look what I can do because you can do it. And so
Yeah. Well,
it's good
I
to
love
recognize that.
movies that are the big heroes' journeys,
Yeah.
but I like watching some of the things like American Idol and those
Yeah.
things too, because I love seeing, the people that come in and they're like, got their head down, and then
Yes.
they go through this metamorphosis as they're, growing in their self-confidence and
Yeah.
their skill. And then suddenly at the end, man, they're owning the stage.
Yeah.
And so I love watching those things too.
Yeah. That's wonderful. I've noticed that too. Literally, like
Yeah.
bodies change and they open up and they stand taller. Yeah. It's
Yeah.
really cool. Another thing you said is you became a coach. Now I'm curious, when you became a coach, did you always call yourself coach?
Hmm. That's a good question. I don't know that I have an answer because I think in the beginning, I think I called myself a coach, but I didn't feel like a coach for a very long time.
Okay.
You know what I mean? It's like
Yeah.
I knew I had the skills, but I
Mhm.
didn't have the confidence because I hadn't really made transformations for people.
Okay.
I was just going with this knowledge that I had been given
Okay.
and hoping that people could make a difference, and see something different in their lives, but I didn't have any evidence of it. And I will say in the very beginning, I really, really struggled with getting clients. And and it's not to say that it's always amazing right now, because it just depends, on how things are going, right?
Right.
But in the beginning, it was like I didn't feel confident enough to ask for what the stuff I was doing was worth.
Okay.
I had my second year in, I think it was. I don't know, because before it was like I had to have so many practice clients and you didn't charge them and all
Right.
that stuff.
Yep.
So the first really paying client I had was a 90-day program for $300. And the thing that I learned, because we learn from every little thing we do, right? If we're
Absolutely.
lucky and we look
Right.
for it.
Yep.
I learned that if you're not charging enough money, people can quit on themselves.
Hmm.
And so she had enough that she could have paid a lot more, but she wanted to pay less. So I said, okay, well, $300, because I hadn't had a paying client yet. So that sounded like a lot to me. Right.
Right. Yeah.
And typically, and this may happen for everybody, but when you're making all these changes, usually about the fourth, the fifth session in, people start trying to figure out how to not do it because
Hmm.
they're fighting against their subconscious mind, wanting to keep them in their box.
Yeah.
And so I knew it was coming,
Right.
right? But I
Yeah,
didn't know how
absolutely.
to say it to her because I kept thinking,
Right.
well, what if I put it in her mind and then she
Right.
wasn't going to quit and now she is? It was like
What have I
all of those
done?
things. Yeah. So anyway, she ended up messaging me on the fourth session and she said, she said, I just don't really have the time to do this. And I don't feel like I'm losing weight. I don't think this is working. And she said, you don't worry about giving me any refunds or anything because I'm just not going to finish. And I was so downhearted. For one thing, it's like 4 sessions and you thought you were going to be skinny. I mean,
Right.
that's the diet mentality that I was trying to
Yeah.
get people away from,
Right.
right?
Yeah.
And so I was like, oh, I must not have done my job right. And then it was like, well, how do I do this better? How do
Yeah.
I make sure that this doesn't happen the next time? So the next person that I hired or hired me
Yeah.
was $10,000. Now, it
Wow.
wasn't
You
for a
went from
90-day
300
yeah,
to
but it was a
10,000.
longer program though, but it was still
Okay.
$10,000, but I still didn't have the confidence to say, okay, it's $10,000. So
Right.
what I did was I said, okay, I said, I've got this 90-day session, and I don't even remember what I told her it was. And then I've got a 6-month session, and I don't know what I said. And then I've got a year-long program that's $10,000. And I said, I'll be honest, you'll get a little bit of movement from the other two, but if you really want to do this, the year program is going to be what you need. And I shut up. And she looked at me and she just sat there for a minute, and I was get I almost felt like I needed to wipe my brow, I was sweating.
Right.
And she said, "Okay, I'll take the year program. So how do we start?" And it was like, "Okay." And
Yeah.
it was like, okay. And then I realized after I started working with her, and she was a model client. She did everything I told her to. She got amazing results. Now, did she lose weight right away? No, but she turned her entire life around. She changed her job. She got rid of her deadbeat husband. She got into a better relationship with her daughter, with her
Yeah.
mother, and she was finally looking in the mirror and saying, I love you. You've got this. And
Yeah.
so she made these huge changes, but I recognized that I had not charged her near enough for the effort that I was putting into this
Yeah.
week after week after week.
Yeah.
And so it was like that was a light bulb moment for me. That $10,000 sounded like a lot because I hadn't done it before.
Gotcha.
And but that lesson that I got from that was it was worth so much more than the $10,000
Yeah.
I charged her. And then on top of that, if she might have gotten even faster results or bigger results if I charged her more, you know? So in
Yeah.
some ways, I did her a disservice, which in the moment, I thought I was asking a lot from her,
Yeah. And you
but I
probably
really
asked more
wasn't.
from her than anybody ever had before. So that's
Yeah.
why she got the transformation she did. So I think it's really easy to, I don't know if you've ever heard this phrase, to should on
Yeah.
yourself is
Yeah.
my
Yeah.
favorite because it's like a sneaky way of sounding like you're saying something else.
Yeah.
So, we can't, I understand what you're saying. You're shooting on yourself though, right? Because she did have a massive transformation and how beautiful could it have been more? Yeah, but it also could have been less. So that's really
Yeah.
cool
Yeah.
that you gave her that opportunity. And because it was so much money, at least in your mind, and maybe to
Hmm.
her, she wasn't going to give up. I know the more I spend on something, the more I'm like, no, I am going to get my money's worth. If it's
Yeah.
free, it's like, it ends up on the floor as soon as you get home and you trample on it and use it to wipe something up.
Yeah.
You don't care. So
Now,
the more you
that's not
spend,
always true either because
it's not always true, but
I've
often.
gotten a few
Yeah,
things that were free, and I mean, I poured myself into it so much
absolutely.
because I believed in it so much.
Right.
So I think sometimes for me, I know I hear a lot of, and I'm not saying you said this, but I hear a lot of coaches saying if it's if they don't pay attention kind of
Right.
thing.
Yeah.
And I think that can be true, but you can also get people that pay out the wazoo and they don't pay attention either.
Exact that, yeah, yeah. It's
Yeah.
just like, yeah, it's with anything, isn't it? That if we lump everything together in one, it's just wrong. It's
Yeah.
like when
Yeah.
people with purple hair are mean, you got some
Yeah.
purple hair there and you're fantastic. Like it just doesn't make sense. You're right to put everything in one group. And there are times where I have gone to a free conference or a free something and I have taken notes like my life depended on it and I have
Hmm.
changed. So yeah, I've done both. And I think maybe it is, I mean, you got in that point of desperation. Maybe she was in a point of desperation.
Well,
Maybe
she was
of it.
because I had spoken to her 3 years earlier and she said, and at that time I didn't even give her a price and it probably would have been $300, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
But she said, I just don't know. Maybe I think I'll just try to do this on my own for a bit.
Wow.
So 3 years later, she was worse off than she was. And so
Ah,
she was ready.
yeah. She
So
was
I
really,
think probably any price I would have said, she would have taken.
yeah.
The thing is that to me, in that moment, with my experience and my lens of the world,
Hmm.
$10,000 was a lot of money. And I
Right.
couldn't imagine it. Now I
Yeah.
paid more than that for my health coaching school too,
Right.
you
Yeah.
know, but anyway,
Yeah.
yeah, she was
Interesting.
ready. Yeah.
Yeah. It's cool when that happens. It's really neat to get a client who is just no, I want to change so badly and it's beautiful. It's interesting. You said session 4 or 5 with what I do. It happens to be like 3 if I'm doing an intensive one I'm like,
Mhm.
just so you know, 3, you're not gonna like me anymore. And you're
Yeah.
gonna think nothing's happening and nothing's changing. And then session 4, you come back and you're like, "Holy cow, my life just flipped upside down in the best way." So, yeah, there's
Yeah.
definitely well, it's the same
Well,
with weight loss too, you hit a plateau, you just do, like,
yeah.
it's exciting and all the easy weight falls off, and then all of a sudden you're, like, plateauing or gaining because all of a sudden now you're getting muscle and you're like, "What is this garbage?" And that's when
Yeah.
a lot of people quit is when it gets real hard.
Yeah, or it's the other thing too is that they don't notice a difference because like when I first started
Yep.
releasing weight, I
Mhm.
lost 50 pounds before anybody noticed.
Right.
So when you're really heavy, a lot
Mhm.
more has to take place for people to really notice. And so you could give up really easy when when you're almost there, you know?
Yes. So
Yeah.
close.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, another thing that happens, it's interesting, I was talking to a client about this recently, is that, she would get frustrated when she would lose weight because people would treat her differently. And then in the same breath, she said, "But it's not because they were treating me differently because I lost weight. I was acting different. I was different. I was more confident. I was more fun to be around when I had lost that weight. So of course people were treating me different. I was more fun. So it was easier to treat me differently. So it was cool that she had made that connection where in the past she'd always been like, why are people nicer to me when I lose weight, and was kind of irritated about it, like putting it on them and then realized, oh, wait, no, the change happens inside.
Hmm.
Weight is good too, but that's not necessarily what they're reacting to. It's my energy. It's what I'm putting out there. So it's really
Yeah.
cool.
Yeah. Well, that's one of the reasons why I tell people too is that let's look and see what you think you're going to get from this. And
Yeah,
let's act like that now,
that's
you know?
great. Yeah.
And
Yeah.
one of the things that I did for this client, because like I said, I'd never had a client that was going to be a year long or anything like that. I really didn't know what I was doing, but it was like I thought I knew how I was, and I have to have a measuring stick to see that I've
Mm,
gone from here to here, right?
right.
And so
Yeah.
what I did was I created a questionnaire for her, 99 questions. And
Wow.
it's questions where you go in and you rate, like it'll say, um, from a level of 1 to 10, where do you say you are on self-love? you
Mm,
know and so I would do that for all these questions where like part of it was about your physical body, some of it was about your how you felt about things, how your relationship were, how you showed up in work. And so I had all these questions, and then we every quarter I would give her the same questionnaire and she would fill it out. And so the first time I did this, when she came back in to answer those questions, she said, "Wait a minute." She said, and she doesn't have a copy of the first one because I didn't want her to have it so
okay.
that she could go in and look at it, right?
Right. Yeah. Last time.
So
Yeah.
we had a session where she gave me her new questionnaire, and while on a Zoom, I printed them both out and I showed her the difference. And it was like, I didn't really realize that I changed in that, or I thought that different. And so that's one of the things that I tell my clients and I tell the people in my group is that, we only have to make a 1% change every day to make exponential growth, right? But
Mm,
that 1% is imperceptible in the moment.
absolutely.
And today you made that change, it's become your new normal. Tomorrow you do it again, that's your new normal. And over time you forget. Just
Yeah.
like when I started looking back at old photos of me and I found one, which I wasn't my heaviest, but when I looked at it, I didn't recognize myself. And it was like,
Wow.
I forgot that I looked like that. So if I didn't have that thing to look at to see the difference,
Yeah.
I could chastise myself right now because I'd really like to release about 20 pounds now.
Right.
So I could get stuck in that, but now I can look back and see, oh my gosh, 20 pounds, give me a break,
Right.
look at how far I've come.
Right.
And so I think it's good for us, or I know it is for me and for my clients, to be able to have something to say, yes, these ideas are different. My ideas when 6 months ago, when you asked me this question or you gave me this affirmation and journal prompt, this is the stuff I wrote down. Oh my gosh, that's
Yeah.
all resolved now. It's all better. I didn't even realize that that was bothering me,
Right.
and so it's given us a place to look at.
Yeah, I love that measuring stick. I'm actually reading a book called The Gap and the Gain. Have you heard of that book?
Mm-mm, mm-mm.
It's right here, Dan Sullivan. I'll show you a picture. I'll just hold it
I'm
up real
familiar
quick.
with Dan Sullivan, but not that
Yeah, so
book.
it's that book right there.
Okay.
So it can happen in your brain, but he talks about that all the time, that if we measure forward, that you the goal in front of you is constantly moving.
Mm-hmm.
Like for you, the goal was $300, and so as
Mm-hmm.
soon as you get there, like the goal moves. You're not like, oh, I've arrived and everything's
Yeah,
great.
yeah.
You just keep, which is great. Like
Let's
keep
go to an island, sip Mai Tais, and we don't have to do anything the
right,
rest of
right,
our
we're all
lives.
done. We made it. We just keep the goal keeps moving a little farther. So you
Right.
wanted to lose, maybe you wanted to lose 20 pounds in the beginning. And then it went to, well, I've lost 20. Well, now I need 50. Well, now I need, so you're constantly chasing this thing that you're probably not actually going to arrive at. And so that's just, you're never going to get there. So that's the gap. The gap is this measuring against something that keeps moving, but the gain is how far you've come. It's that question.
Yeah.
It's the looking at the
Yeah.
picture being like, wow, that's not even me anymore. So you're able to see, oh my gosh, I have gained all of this knowledge, all of this experience. I've changed so much because we turn around, look at who we were and how far we've come. So
Yeah. Yeah.
that's just, it's so beautiful that you started doing that with your clients, with yourself. It changes your perspective, doesn't it? It makes you
Mm.
like, it gives you this file of like, oh, wait, I can do this
Yeah.
because I did do something hard when I didn't think I could. So that hard thing I can get because I've already done something hard. It's really
Yeah.
cool.
Yeah.
Awesome. So you said another thing. You said you started coaching 7 years ago. And if my math is correct, that means you started a whole new thing when you were 58. Is
Yep.
that correct?
Mm-hmm.
I remember, well, my cousin and I would always make up songs. My whole family was like, you guys need to make up a song for whatever thing we were celebrating. And my uncle had turned 40. So it was a whole over the hill for, like he was the oldest. It was back in the 1900s when 40 was ancient. And I'm
Back in
curious
the
why,
1900s, that just kills me, you know?
right? Last millennia, for crying out loud. It's crazy. But at 58, like what gave you the the whatever,
The
the
chutzpah.
gumption, the spunk, yeah, to start something brand new at 58 years old?
Well, I mean, I grew up in an entrepreneur family.
Okay.
So maybe that's part of it, but I don't know. It's like I feel like if you decide to get old, you get old.
Mm,
But if you decide to keep growing, you keep growing, and that's different. And so, has my body aged? Do I have wrinkles on my face? Do I have all that stuff? Yes, I do. Do I occasionally have an issue with my hip? Yes, I do. I'm working on it. But it's like I'm constantly looking for what's the next thing that I can learn to be better, to grow, to just become, because I'm
mhm.
definitely not anywhere near the end
Yeah.
of what I want to do. And to me, it's like one of, and I may have said this to you on the podcast, I don't remember, but one of my greatest fears has always been to not have made a big enough difference in the world and to be forgotten.
Mhm.
And so to me, it's a huge thing to make sure that I leave this world better than I found it.
Yeah.
And so right now, I'm making a difference in some people's lives, but I would love for it to be expanding out. And I may have shared this with you, like since we just had our podcast the other day, I can't remember, to be honest with you.
Okay.
But I was talking about it this morning on my live as well, as um there was a commercial many years ago, and it was actually about STDs.
Okay.
Go figure.
Awesome.
But anyway, it was like, it showed this couple and they're hugging and you can tell they're about to get it on, right?
Mhm.
And they say, well, wait a minute, this is your partner, but that's not who you're going to bed with. You're going to bed with their partner, that
Mhm.
partner's partner. And though by the end of the commercial, they had this whole screen full of these little tiny pictures of all these people that they had been
Yeah.
in bed with, right? So
Right.
I think we turn it around the other way too. So every time that I say something to someone and it affects their life magically, then they say it to someone else and they say it to someone else. And then it becomes like there's this litany of people that I've touched that I don't even know that I've touched. And
Yeah.
so to me, that is magical. And have you ever heard the story that Zig Ziglar tells about kicking the cat? And
I don't think so.
it's so funny because I was talking about all this morning. It's like deja vu kind of thing.
Awesome. I love
Um,
it.
but he tells this story about kicking the cat. And so he says that there's a CEO of this company, and the CEO has just gotten reamed by the big owner of this
Yeah.
company because they don't have the profits that they're supposed to. So he
Okay.
calls the managers into his office. He reams them, especially one in particular, and because they weren't measuring up. So they leave their office and then they go to their associates and they ream them. They go to their secretaries, they ream them, and it just goes on and down the line to the last guy. He goes home and he is so ticked off. He screams at his wife, who in turn turns at their son who's wanting something and screams at him. He walks outside and he just goes over and he kicks the cat.
Jeez.
So he says that that CEO or the one up above him should have just gone over to that house and kicked that cat themselves because they brought it all the way down, right?
Oh,
So
yeah.
I like to look at it as in the opposite on this one too. So we go to the grocery store and we talk to the cashier and we don't know anything about her. We call her by name. We say, thank you so much for being here. I know it's late in the afternoon and this is a holiday and you're so sweet and thank you, whatever it is. And then that cashier who was in a bad mood when you started now is nicer to the next person that comes up, who is then nicer to their spouse when they get home, who's nicer to their child. And then the child goes and hugs the cat. So we
Yeah.
can affect people in a totally opposite way. We can have them go home and love that cat, or we can have somebody go home and kick the cat. And it's our choice.
Yeah. That's a brilliant story. It really is, because I don't know about you, but I may have been the I may have been every single person in all of those stories at some
Yeah,
point in
yeah,
my
yeah,
life. And sometimes some days I am all of those
yeah,
people.
yeah,
So I do these things called walkie talkies where I go on my morning walks, and I'm always thinking that's like my best thinking time. And this morning I was walking, and I wasn't walkie talking, but I did one right after. And I was walking on the sidewalk, and this gentleman, I didn't know it was a gentleman at the time, it was just a car, came out. And so I kind of slowed down because, he needed to get going. He saw me and backed up, so I was able to go. It was the same that for me, it made me actually feel really loved. I thought
mm-hmm.
he did something that he probably doesn't even remember. Like 2 minutes after doing it, he probably forgot it happened. And
Yeah,
here I am now, what is it, like 10 hours later, talking about it to you, and then other people will hear that my life was changed, my day was changed, I was happier and more kind because somebody backed up a few feet. And I tried to make eye contact with him. He was, I don't know, on his phone or looking down or whatever. So I was like waving at him like a crazy, thank you. And he probably would have been like, it's not even a big deal. But to me, it was a really, really big
yeah.
deal. Yeah, it's a great story. We do affect people. So I love that what you're doing is you're teaching people about this mosaic life that is beautiful from all these broken, like maybe jagged as, I mean, those are the prettiest pieces on a mosaic, is like the
Mm-hmm.
gnarliest one. And it's so cool that you're out there telling people that, hey, I'm doing air quotes here, your broken life is maybe beautiful. And not
Yeah,
maybe, it is beautiful. It's
yeah,
creating
always,
something
always.
incredible, because look at how far you've come. And so dare I be so bold as to say, Vicky, you have already made a difference in this life and in this world to so many. So take a minute and look at yourself and say, well done, Vicky. I know you're going to change many more lives, but my gosh, like every once in a while, do a little, I did something good, that's
Yeah,
really
well,
cool.
I try to, but sometimes you know how we are.
Yeah.
But I do all the time. Like I think I had told you I have a picture of me at 5 years old in my bedroom. Did I tell you that?
I don't think you did. Somebody else told me
Okay.
that exactly today, though.
Oh, interesting. Yeah,
Yeah.
I have this picture and it's me when I was 5 years old. I'm sitting, it's one of those Olin Mills, the old picture things. And I'm
Yeah.
sitting with my legs crossed and I'm just smiling. And so I talked to her and I tell her how much I love her. And one of the dares that Stacy gave us one time is one of the reasons why I say this one thing, because she asked in this dare, what would you like to have someone say to you?
Mm.
And I had to think about it for a long time. What would I really want someone to say to me? And my big thing was, it's going to be okay.
Oh,
And
wow.
then I turned around and I said, I think I need to say that to my 5-year-old self. And I already had the picture in my room.
Yeah.
And because I don't know, I thought my mom gave me this huge Olin Mills picture. I mean, it's a big picture. I'm thinking, how silly does it look for me to have this picture of me hanging in my room? But anyway, I've got it there. So I started going and telling her, no matter what's going on, everything's going to be okay. I promise you, everything's going to be okay. And the first time I did it, oh my God, the tears that were flowing from my
Mhm.
face. And sometimes it'll still get me in the feels
Yeah, I
just
bet.
from talking about it. And then that's when I realized that I may not be 5 years old anymore, but that's what I want to hear. I don't
Yeah.
want somebody to solve it. I don't want somebody to rescue me. I just want them to reassure me, a nice warm hug, and it's going to be okay.
Yeah. And isn't it cool that you're able to look at your 5-year-old self as a 64-year-old and say it's all gonna be okay because you already know it is.
Yeah,
And you're
yeah,
not telling her there's not gonna be bumps. You're not telling her you're not gonna have to pick yourself up and do hard things. You're telling her it's all gonna be okay.
yeah,
And what a cool measuring stick from 5 to now,
yeah,
and to be able to tell her that and then to believe it because look at where you are. Look at how far you've come.
yeah.
And then look
Like,
at the transformation you're helping others to have
yeah,
through magic or whatever people wanna call it, because it
yeah,
feels magical, doesn't it? When someone
yeah.
has a big breakthrough through that seems impossible, the only word that comes to people is magic because they
Hmm.
can't explain it.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, that's incredible. Oh, I love this. This is so fun talking about all of this. Um, let's see, I wrote down oh, another thing you talked about at the very beginning, we're gonna jump on back to that. You said you're really
Okay.
mindful of time
Hmm.
now. When did you notice I mean, was there a specific shift, like at a point where you're like, "Wait a minute, I gotta pay attention."
Well, I think for me, it was more of a shift of realizing that time was an illusion in our
Okay,
everyday life.
okay,
So it's like, and I wish I could remember the exact thing that happened, but I do not. But I remember that there was something that was going on in my life, and we were doing things. And I think it might have been myself and my daughter. I don't remember. But it was like I looked at the clock and I felt like a day had gone by almost. It was like, it was glorious and it was fun. So it wasn't like it was a drudgery thing, but
yeah,
it was like, it was glorious. And I looked at the clock and it had only been a few hours. It had not been the whole day. And I thought, wait a minute, how is that possible? Because we've still got this much of the day left and it feels like we've already enjoyed this much. So I
yeah,
thought, so time can't be the same all the time because otherwise it wouldn't feel that way. And
yeah,
then I had a conversation with someone that was in another part of the world. I think she was in Australia, and it was the next day for her. I thought, okay, now
yeah.
she's a day in the future, yet we're talking right here on this device. So is time really real?
Ah,
And then I thought, okay, even if time's an illusion, we still know that this elusive thing of time has a limit. There's like
yeah,
an end to this box, right?
yeah.
And so we don't know when our end is. It could be tomorrow. My husband passed away from a massive heart attack at 43,
Oh, I'm
right?
sorry, yeah,
And so we don't know what we've got. And so that one was the thing that really got me to thinking about that, because the day before I had talked to him about some things that I was aggravated about, right? The morning of, he was really tired, I was frustrated, I was trying to do my thing, And then the next call I got was that he was in the hospital and he had had a heart attack. And I drive to the hospital. And at the time, my son was 16 and my daughter was 7. So she was at school. And so I called one of my friends that her daughter and my daughter were friends. And I said, Gary's in the hospital. Can you just pick up Alexis for me? Alexis, listen to me. That's my granddaughter.
Oh,
Haley for me. It's her middle name, but
okay.
Haley. Pick up Haley for me and just take her home with you. And she said, sure.
Yeah.
So I called the school, my son's 16. I called the high school and I said, okay, I need you to have my son outside the school when I get there. I said, it's going to take me 20 minutes to drive from here to there. I don't want you to tell him what's going on. I want you to just say your mom's picking you up and be on the curb. Do not make me sit there and wait because I'm getting to that hospital.
Yeah.
And so they were standing out there.
Good.
He opens the door and he said, what's going on? And he slings his book bag in the back seat and he climbs in. And I said, well, your dad's had a heart attack. Now, this was his second one.
Okay.
And and then he says, I told him to quit smoking. And then he goes into this litany of things, right? And so it's a very white knuckle thing going to the hospital. And I know you didn't ask for all of this, but I'm going to tell you anyway.
Yeah. Thank you.
So we get to the hospital and my husband's family is there. But let me back up. My husband and I were divorced at the time. We divorced when my daughter was 3,
Okay.
and now she's 7. Is that
Okay.
right? No, she was 4 and then 7. So anyway, we were divorced for 3 years, but the last year of before he passed away, we were dating. We were trying to make things work out. So the weekends that he had the kids, he had the kids. The weekends I had the kids, because I had them all the time, we
Yeah.
did stuff together. We
Okay.
were getting closer and closer, and he wanted to get married again so bad, but I kept saying, the reason we got divorced is still there. We have not worked this out, and we can't do it to the kids a second time. So let's just keep working on it. So that's where we were.
Okay.
So we get to the hospital, and of course, in my mind, I'm thinking, oh my God, if I had said, yes, we'll get married, then all of
Right.
this wouldn't be happening. You know how we do.
Yeah. Yeah.
And so we're in there and we're talking, and this nurse comes by and she walks in the room and she said, is this the Pool family? And we said, yes. And she said, well, the doctor will be in to talk to you in just a moment. And she had this up in her voice and everything. So she walked out of the room. We said, oh, everything must be okay.
Yeah.
He's going to be fine, right?
Yeah.
So then the doctor walks in and she just deadpan face, she looks at it and she said, well, I have to just tell you that Gary died. You talk about a slap in the face. The nurse had that tone in her voice, like, it's good. I
Yeah.
mean, she could have at least said, the doctor will be in to see you in a minute. I mean,
Something.
holy
Right.
smokes,
Yeah.
something. And my son, 16 years old, he lets out this blood curdling scream because we just thought suddenly everything's going to be okay, but he wasn't. So then I had to figure out, because my son knew, I had to console him. But then I've got a 7-year-old daughter. What the hell do I say? What do
Yeah.
I do? And I will say the hardest thing I've ever done in my life is tell her. But it's interesting though, to show how kids are, right? She was 7 and she was at her friend's house and she was supposed to be spending the night there. Well, I called the mom and I said, bring her to my house. And when she walks in the door, I'm there. Nicholas is hiding in his room. And then some of my friends are there. Some of my family's there. And she walks in, she's looking around, like, why are all these people in her house?
Yeah.
And I said, Haley, come on over here just a minute. And I said, come sit in my lap. And she sat in my lap. And I looked at her and I said, sweetie, I really don't know how to tell you this other than to just tell you. And she said, what? I said, well, your daddy had another heart attack today and he died. And she just looked at me for a minute and then she started crying. And I hugged her and she cried and she cried. And then she stopped and she looked at me and she said, can I still go spend the night at Tori's house? I said, yeah, if you want to go to Tori's house, you can go to Tori's house.
Yeah.
And so I was like, okay, you know? So she went and spent the night at her friend's house. And they called me later to tell me that Tori's dad was sitting and watching TV. And he was in his little recliner. He was flipping through the channels.
Mhm.
And Haley was running and playing. And she just stopped and went and got in his lap. And she sat there and she was watching TV. And Joe said, Haley was just looking at the TV. And then she turned and she looked right in his face. And she said, you know, my daddy died today. He said, yeah, I know, sweetie. She said, okay. And then she got up and she ran off. And Joe had the hardest time after that because he said it was like such a gut punch for him to hear her say it, you know? Um, and so she just turned 30 and she still has issues every now and then. And I took both of them to grief counseling. And they said the counselor said that Haley, especially being as young as she was going to have more issues because she was younger. So her level of understanding was going to change as she aged,
Okay.
and that she might have a really hard time with certain events. Things happen like she gets married, she graduates from high school, she graduates from college. Certain things that you expect both your parents to be there, it would be like this punch, right?
Right.
And she used to get really angry when some of her friends, because she was one of the cheerleaders and doing all that stuff, and they would have these little cookouts and they'd have these sleepovers, and some of these kids would be complaining about their dads.
Mm.
And she'd get so angry and she'd end up yelling at them and telling them not to say those things about their dads. And she was very adamant about it. And it's interesting the things that she's had to deal with that. And to be honest, after he passed, I said we were divorced, but we were trying to work it out. And
Right.
when I got in the car to go pick up my son, I bargained with God the whole way.
I bet.
Okay, God, I promise if you'll let him live, I'll get off the fence, we'll get married, we'll do this, we'll do exactly what we need to do, and just let him live, just let him live. And then when he died, I thought, what? I don't understand. I promised, I said
You're
that I
right.
would do this.
Yeah.
So it took quite a long time for me to realize that that wasn't our journey. And to be honest with you, if he had lived and we had gotten married again, we might have been divorced again in 2 or 5 years. I don't know. But it was a very hard thing to go through. And for the longest time, and still sometimes I feel guilty to date that I'm being untrue to him. Still today.
Well, thank you for sharing that.
Yeah.
It's very, very tender, and it does have a lot to do with time, doesn't it? Makes you real mindful
Mm-hmm.
that
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
think we can, it's easy to get stuck in the tomorrow or later,
Mm-hmm.
but then you get an experience like that, and
And maybe there's not one.
yeah. And look at all that you've done since then, the
Yeah.
beautiful changes you've made I mean, just in the time we've known each other and in the stories that you've told that I know that you do, you help people to do incredible things. And I mean, I guess I don't know how that feels. My sister recently lost her husband um, just a couple weeks before he turned 40. So they had two
Yeah.
babies, a 4-year-old and an almost 1-year-old. So I understand as a sister, and it's
Yeah.
heartbreaking as a sister. So as a sister, I
Yeah.
offer
Yeah.
my love to you. And what you're so you probably maybe you get tired of hearing you're strong. I mean, what else are you going to do? I guess you have a 16-year-old and a 7-year-old. What are you going to do? You have to be
Yeah.
strong.
Well, you don't have to be. You choose to be.
Yeah.
You decide to be.
Yeah, that's true. That's a word I wanted to talk about a little bit more, if that's okay. You've said that a handful of times,
What's that?
that I made the decision.
Yeah.
Oh, you have to decide. And it feels like everything that you've talked about, whether you don't remember the suddenly why, but you said I had to decide. I made a
Yeah.
decision.
Yeah.
Over and over, you said, make a decision. And it seems like in this group that I'm in, the first step in this massive transformation, and it's a whole pillar, it's a whole thing they build on, is the word decide. And initially I was like, well, yeah, you just make a decision. It's not a big deal, but it is. I'm learning more and more.
Yeah.
When you decided to go on, you decided to become a coach, you decided I'm going to lose this weight. Doesn't matter what it takes. Here's all my money. I'm making
Yeah.
this decision because I'm going to change. And you made a decision. And maybe the difference is that sometimes we decide on having a hamburger versus chicken nuggets, but that's just a choice. It's not a decide.
Right. There's a difference because
Yeah.
to me, and I will say, that some of the people that I follow and I listen to, they really eloquently were able to help me to discern what was the difference between a choice and a decision. And a
Okay.
choice means that you've got like this basket, and you're choosing. And so at some point, you might choose that basket A is better than basket B, or vice versa. And so you can move around with what it is that you're doing. A
Right.
decision is you either put the two baskets in one basket and that's the basket you're working from, or you have a different basket. But
Okay.
you've decided that everything is coming from here, and that it's like the burning the boats kind of thing. I know you've heard that
Yeah.
before. You
Yeah.
burn
Yeah.
it's and but I don't believe in putting yourself in a dire position like a lot of people talk about burning the boats, as far as like if you're wanting to be a coach and you quit your day job and you
Oh, I
start
see.
being a coach, and because you want to sink or swim, well, more than likely you're going to sink and you're going to have to go back to a day job, because
Right.
you don't walk into this thing all of a sudden having all these clients. And
Right.
oh, I will suggest that anybody that's listening to someone who says they quit their job, they burned the boats and everything was great, check and see if they were living with their parents.
Right.
Check and see what their foundation was that enabled them to do that, because not everybody has that ability.
Right.
And so I think taking anybody's statement and looking at it that it encompasses all of us is
Mhm.
very naive, and it
Yeah.
can put you into a lot of trouble. Because I will say, if I had burned my boats when I first started, I would have sunk
Yeah.
big time, you know?
Absolutely.
And then you have all these excuses in the world why you can't do it, because
Mm.
you've just proved it once again.
Right.
So I think it's making a decision means that you've decided that no holds barred, this is what you want the outcome to be.
Mhm.
Now, you have not decided how long it's going to take you to get there. You haven't decided the exact path,
Mhm.
because that's an ever changing thing. Like you were talking about, the goal is ever
Mhm.
revolving or evolving, right?
Mhm.
And so our mission of what we're wanting to do, we decide, but it's like, I think you and I talked about it. If you're, the beauty of having a coach is that they can look up above you and they've got the little drone and they can say, hey, you lost your ball out in the back 40 over here, go over here and get the ball. But
Right.
if you're left on your own, you would be all over the place.
Right.
And so it's deciding that you're going to get there, but having the wherewithal to ask for assistance and help so somebody can see where you've lost the ball and how you can get it back and keep moving in the right direction.
Yeah. Absolutely.
Did I
It's
even answer your question? I already forgot what the question
Yeah, it was
was.
about time. It was about time. Like,
Okay.
and then we talked about decisions.
Oh,
Yes.
yeah, yeah.
Yes.
Okay.
It's so
Yeah.
good. Yeah. It's so good. It's wonderful. I love that conversations. It's almost like, you have a thought and all of a sudden you're somewhere else. You're like, how did I get there? And then you
Yeah.
backtrack. Oh, okay. It
Yeah.
does all make sense. We're just doing
Yeah.
that out
Happens
loud.
all the time, right?
We're just doing it verbally. It's awesome. We lived in New York and my brother came and we decided to go to the Macy's Thanksgiving Day parade. And it was interesting because what I saw was entirely different than what he saw. I saw shoulders and heads and a sea of people. And he
Hmm.
said, he doesn't love crowds. And he said the one thing that he thinks saved him was because he's a foot taller than me. And so he's like 6'3", and he could see over everybody's head, so he could breathe. And there was one time recently, because he lives in Florida and we do as well. And he got down, it's not rude. He got down to my level, meaning height wise. And he was looking around. He's like, this is so claustrophobic, but that's where I live. So it isn't
Mhm.
fine for
Yeah.
me. So it's interesting that, like, as a coach or as somebody who's got an extra foot or an extra year or more experience can really say, I can see everything. So let me help you in what I see. I imagine you are much better at helping someone who has lost a husband than somebody who hasn't, because you've been there. You can see it more clearly. You can understand things that don't need to be spoken. Women get together who've had babies, and that's what they talk about because they get
I
it,
know.
right?
Yeah,
If
yeah.
you've been divorced, you talk with people who've been divorced. If you love your dog, you talk with people who love their dogs, because you don't have to explain it all. There's like this understanding. And so it's really cool to have a coach, like you said, who can see all those things, and somebody who's human and has been there. I think sometimes people who are coaches think, well, I need to be perfect. And because I'm not perfect, I'm not a good coach. Actually, I think that makes you a better coach because you
Yeah,
get it. You're not
yeah,
like floating above being like, well, I have no idea what you're going through, but you should just, figure it out. You're
yeah,
like, no, I know how
yeah,
it feels. And this is section 4 or 5 is going to be tough. And this is why. But guess what? You can get through it. This is how to
yeah.
get to the other side of it.
Yeah, yeah. Have you ever heard the story about I don't remember if it was monks or whatever. It doesn't really matter. And the elephant, and how they had them describe
Yes.
the elephant.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Explain
Yeah.
it though. I love this story. It's so
Yeah,
good.
well, I may not do as eloquent a job as somebody else, but it's like they have these people that are around this elephant and they're blindfolded and they have to touch the elephant and describe what they see or what they think it is. So there's somebody that's on the tail, somebody on the side, somebody at the front. And so each person, they're all describing the elephant, but they're describing it in such different thing. It's like the guy at the tail, it's this long thing with some hair at the end, and then on the side, it's this big, hard, massive thing. And the guy in the front, he's got this big, long trunk. And then he feels like these tusks, but he doesn't know what they are. Somebody else may feel the ears. So none of them has a clear picture about what anything is.
Right.
They're only talking about it from the perspective of where they're at in the room, right? We
Mhm.
talked about your room before, right? And
Yes.
so it's interesting. Like, I like to talk about our lens of the world, which is filtered by the things that have happened in our lives, have colored or skewed our lens of the world, just like these guys standing around this elephant. Now, with their blindfolds off and standing back and getting the whole picture, they know it's an elephant, but piece by piece, it's imperceptible. And that's what our journey is too, is that when we don't have the full picture, we don't have somebody helping guide us, like I said, the drone up above,
Mhm.
seeing where the ball went out in the fields, then, you know, we're going to be spending a lot of time trying to turn an elephant by pulling its tail. We're not going to be getting from the front and moving it. And so it's important for us to recognize that it's okay to ask someone for help. And you were just talking about the old saying, birds of a feather flock together kind of thing. But
Mhm.
you also, I think, when it comes to life, you have to be careful of that too,
Mhm.
because if you have had like, uh, like for me, for instance, with the thing with my husband, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
There's grief there, but I
Yeah.
don't want to be in a grief group
Okay.
because
Yeah.
that's a lot of people that are in the midst of it and they're trying to get out of it. And although I get very emotional about it, I am way past that. I
Mhm.
am to the place where I recognize the gift I had in so many things with him, even though we ended up being divorced. It was like after we got divorced, it was even better. It was like crazy, right? I even
Right.
told him we were great at dating. It was the marriage part we had a hard time with.
Yeah.
But, um, it's being careful that we don't surround ourselves with people that are just as miserable as we are in the moment.
Absolutely.
And so as you step out of that misery place, they're going to be saying, well, what do you mean you don't want to be with us anymore? And they're going to pull you, not
Yeah.
consciously,
Right.
right? But they're
Yeah.
going to pull you back into that scenario. And that's why sometimes we have a hard time as we're stepping into this next version of ourselves, because
Yeah.
we can feel there's a disconnect with some people in our lives now. And there's nothing wrong with that,
Right.
because the thing is, they can choose to grow right along with you, or you can choose to stay with them. But
Yep.
for me, I choose to keep growing. And then hopefully, as I continue to grow, they'll start saying, hey, wait a minute, I want what she's got. And they'll
Right.
come on board, you know? What is it that, um, let's see, who is it? Gosh, I can't even remember who it was, but there was some philanthropist, I can't remember who it was, that said, you can't get sick enough to help sick people. And it's
Oh,
like you can't
interesting.
get poor enough to help poor people. The only way you can help a sick person is to be healthy yourself and help them get healthy. Or if they're poor, you get richer so that you can help them get richer. So a lot of times we fall into that trap of we don't want them to feel bad because we're doing
Right.
better, you know?
Yeah. That's a really interesting point. Yeah, I had never thought about that. Could you explain? I feel like this is a terrible transition, but maybe it
It's
isn't.
okay.
Maybe it's a great transition. I
Hey,
have
it's
no idea.
perfect. It's
Uh,
perfect.
I want to just maybe we'll turn. Maybe that's the right
Okay.
way to say it.
Pivot,
You're you're
pivot.
a you're a hypnotherapist
Uh-huh.
or a hypno. Is that what it's a hypnotherapist?
Well,
Could,
I mean, it depends on who you talk to. I have several hypnosis certifications.
okay, several. So what? Okay, so you have several hypnosis certifications. If you were talking to someone who had no idea what that meant and is picturing you on a stage almost doing like a magic trick, because
Mhm.
I think that's what often people think of. I know I did until I experienced something a little bit different. Could you just explain to our listeners, to our watchers, to me, help me to understand better what someone with a lot of hypnosis certifications does to help people as a coach?
Okay. Well, I think that that's a very big question because I think it's different for everybody.
Okay.
So I can only speak for me.
Okay,
Um,
perfect.
so for me, what that means is I'm a hypnotist and a life coach and a transformational coach, which I have all these tools that are not part of hypnosis, but I
Gotcha.
have all these other tools too.
Okay.
Um, because the way I like to look at it is and when I sit down with my clients, like I referred to earlier, I have like over an hour conversation, especially that first time, about what's going on in their life, what they really want to find. And the thing that we need to know, or maybe your listeners or your watchers need to know, is that our our conscious and our subconscious mind are, it's if there was a big circle that we could see, the conscious mind would be at the top and the subconscious mind would be kind of down at the bottom, and then in the middle there'd be this band that
Mhm.
is um our beliefs, and they are usually, we get them between the ages of 0 and 7. That's what we believe about ourselves, from what people have said, what people have done, what we've thought about what people said, because a lot of times, it's like our dog doesn't understand when we're being sarcastic. Well, our little brains when we were little did not understand sarcasm either. And
Right.
so it takes everything as truth, right?
Yeah.
And so we have this lens of the world that we're looking through. And then when you look at the subconscious mind, I have this diagram that has like pluses and minuses. So the minuses are things that maybe were not so good. I won't say negative because it just means they weren't so good.
Okay.
And then there's positive things that have happened in our life. So there's pluses.
Okay.
And so as a hypnotherapist, as a hypnotist, and all these other things that I do, what I do is I help figure out what these minuses are that are in this subconscious part of our brain, because our conscious mind is only working for us about 12% of the time. So everything else is coming from the subconscious underneath beliefs that we don't even know are there.
Yeah.
And so if you can look at your life and you don't like anything that's there, it's
Mhm.
subconscious that believes
Yeah.
that is where you're at, right? And
Right.
so I help you to uncover those things. But not only that, is these things that we think are not so good, these memories, these thoughts, these beliefs that we have that aren't serving us, I help us. What I do is I help to uncover what those are,
Okay.
and then I help to um extract's not the right words. Well, let me back up. So let's just say that if I were to open my office door right now and a whole bunch of puppies come running in, I would be so overly excited and I'd be petting them and I would say, let's smell that puppy breath. I'd be doing all the stuff, right? But
Right.
I
Yeah.
love puppies, all right? But someone who at the age of 3 was attacked by a dog is
Yeah.
not going to feel the same way. When you open the door, those puppies are going to run in and they may want to pet the puppies because they know that that's the correct thing at this stage.
Right.
However, internally, they just have this angst that happens and they may break out in a sweat and they feel this fear. They may
Hmm.
fight it, but they feel it, right? And
Yeah.
so, this not so perfect event that happened in your childhood, what I help to do is you don't lose the memory of it. You don't lose the lesson that you got from it, but you lose that emotional kick that it gives you, that piece that makes you sweat and
Right.
feel like, oh my gosh, I can't believe I've done this again, or I can't believe when
Right.
those things happen, right? And so I help to eliminate that mental chatter about it and that emotional charge that it gives you. And then I actually can help to put in a new piece to it that feels good. So it depends on what the actual thing is that we're playing with, but we
Right.
can make it a where we recognize the lesson out of it. We recognize the good that came from it.
Right.
Whether, like with the little puppy analogy, maybe if she hadn't had this thing that happened when she was little, and I'm saying she just because it's just what's in my
Yeah.
mind, but then maybe if she hadn't had that, she might have reached out and petted a dog that would have taken her friggin' hand.
Right.
There's a
Yeah.
reason for everything that happens to us.
Absolutely.
And, like I had the other day, I know this is kind of an off topic, but I was going down the road and I was going to go into the right hand lane. And when I went to get into the right hand lane, suddenly somebody was blowing on their brakes and they're honking their horn because they were either moving so fast or they were my blind spot. I do not know.
Right.
But I very quickly got back in my lane. Nothing happened, right?
Yeah.
Not an hour later, I was driving down the road. And of course, at that point, I'm really cautious, right? Because
Yeah.
that happened an
Absolutely.
hour ago. So I'm like really alert.
Yeah.
And I get close to this red light. My light's green. Zip. Light runs right through it. A car runs right through the light. Now, if
Wow.
I had been still on automatic mode, then I probably would have gotten sided,
Yeah.
bam, right? And who knows what would have happened. So
Right.
I feel like that flat tire we get that gets us off the road, or if the red light's
Mhm.
too long, or there's construction, whatever it is, it's there for a purpose. And so I've got where I look at it as, okay, I'm paying attention now, and we're good. And so it's just all of those things help us, right? So we
Absolutely.
don't want to remove things that were put there for a purpose. We just want to take that angst out of it.
Yeah.
And some people, when I do hypnosis with them, some people feel like they're asleep. Some
Okay.
people feel like they're sitting there. They can feel the chair. They can hear everything I'm saying. They think they're not even hypnotized, but they are.
Okay.
And so everybody has a different feeling about it. And
Okay.
the thing that I like to share is that when I know we've seen stage hypnosis and things like that, where people cluck like a chicken, and we've seen movies where somebody says XYZ and suddenly this person robs a bank,
Right.
all these different things. Well, as far as the XYZ and they robbed the bank, they had to wanted to rob the bank to start with because they couldn't be made to do anything with hypnosis that they didn't want to do. And so I don't know if we got enough time for me to share another little story.
Yeah. Absolutely.
Okay. Well, and I like to share this with any hypnosis clients because I've had two hypnosis events in my life before I ever became a hypnotist. One of them, I was wanting to lose weight. I I went to this woman for hypnosis, and after a few sessions, she had this thing where I had a couple of people in my life that were it's somewhat responsible for me feeling like I wasn't good enough and I ate my feelings, right?
Yeah.
So I was going to go down in my mind this flight of stairs, and at the bottom of the stairs were these two people. And it was just my imagination. They weren't really there, right?
Right.
And so we start going down the stairs. She's counting me down. And as we get about halfway down, I said, wait, wait, wait. And she said, what? And I said, I don't want to do it. And she said, why? She said, you said you wanted to do this. And I said, I know I did, but it feels uncomfortable. I don't want to do it. It's making me nervous. I don't want to do it. And she
Yeah.
said, okay, if you're sure. And I said, I'm positive. So she just diverted and changed the whole hypnosis session. So I didn't go down the steps. I just went somewhere else. Right.
Okay.
So I was very capable of saying, this doesn't feel comfortable. I don't want to do it now. Okay. So that's what we did. And then the other thing that I did was I was actually on a cruise, and there was a hypnotist that was on the cruise ship, and he did this big show. Now, those you wouldn't know it, but I am an introvert extrovert. So there's times I want to be out loud and proud in front of everybody, and other times I don't want anybody to notice me. I want to stand back and watch what's going on, right? And it just depends. And so sometimes I'm looking for ways that I can be loud and proud and still feel like nobody can laugh at me or nobody can say anything because it was not in my control, kind of thing. Does
Right.
that make
Yeah.
sense?
Yeah,
So
totally.
anyway, so when he starts saying who wants to be hypnotized, I was like, well, me. So I ran up to the stage, and the stage was full of people. I mean, there were so many people. And so he went through this process of eliminating people to see who was really who really wanted it and who could go deep, right?
Uh-huh.
So at the end, there were 5 of us. I was one of the 5. And so I was so into this that he kept calling me up in front of the group of the 5 of us, asking me questions and having me do stuff and everything. I was having the time of my life. But at any point, I could have said, no, not going to do it. But I didn't want to, because it was like it gave me this freedom to let my inhibitions go and not be
Okay.
concerned about what everybody thought, right?
Okay.
And so I did it. I had amazing time. And I remember most of it. Some of it I don't remember. My family was there, so they tell me stuff every now and then. But the next day, people kept stopping me and saying, oh, I saw you at the show last night. It was so much fun. You were fun to watch. And I loved it. But if I hadn't been under hypnosis and I'd been up acting the fool, I might have been a little more embarrassed if they stopped me. I don't know.
Okay.
You know what I
Interesting.
mean?
Yeah.
So it enables you to be who you want to be, and with it just letting it out, and it kind of helps you sometimes to get more in touch with who you want to be.
Yeah. That's really neat.
Yeah.
Okay, so as we wrap up with like so much goodness on here, this has been so incredible. Thank you for you went very deep into a lot of things. We laughed, we cried,
I know.
we did it all. It was incredible. People want to get a hold of you if they want to work with you, if they want, I mean, I'll leave the notes um all over the place. I'll leave links and different things. What is the best way for people to get a hold of you, and what so best way to get a hold of you, and then the other thing is what would somebody like if I don't even know how to say this, if something is happening in their mind, if they're like, oh, I'm curious, is curiosity enough to reach out and ask you questions? Like, is
Oh
that
yeah, yeah.
enough?
Um,
Okay, cool.
yeah, I
Awesome.
love to answer questions, and sometimes in the asking of questions, I can kind of get a little insight on what some things that people need, and so I do a free 30-minute consultation. And when I do that, I normally at least one thing somebody goes away with that it was enlightening,
Excellent.
just at least one thing. And
Good.
so some people decide to work with me at that time, and some people wait for 3 years. That's
You're
okay.
right.
Yeah, yeah.
They go when they're
But
ready.
yeah, yeah,
Absolutely.
that's right. So, when the student is ready, the teacher will come, but I'm here.
Yep.
And so I think my Calendly link is the Enlightened Peach, but but off the top of my head, I don't remember. Hold on a second. I will tell you.
Excellent.
Hold on. Let me look real quick. Okay, my Calendly, yes. It is calendly.com/ the Enlightened Peach /30.
Okay.
All
Awesome.
right. And
totally.
then anybody that's interested in joining my group on Facebook, the Stand Up and Stand Out community, they just go to vickypoole.com, VICKIEPOOLE.com. And then that puts them right into the portal, and then they answer the questions, and then they can get into the group, because I have a hard, fast rule. If you don't answer the questions, then you're not going to be a good fit for the group. So
Yeah,
that is the only way right now I can discern if they're serious enough about wanting to be there.
right.
And so, yeah. And I'm on Facebook as the Enlightened Peach, and Instagram as the_enlightened_peach.
Excellent. Well, cool. So if people want to get a hold of you, they can. They
Yes, yes.
can. Excellent. Well, Vicky, it has been phenomenal. Thank you so much for being on my podcast and for showing us in so many ways that you were so much stronger than you thought, and then acting, deciding, and doing things and making massive changes. I just don't think you have anything to worry about. I think you have already changed the world for the better. And so I
Oh,
just
thank you.
I hope you think of that often, that I
Yeah.
have a difference, because guess what? You made a difference in me. You have
Oh,
gotten me thinking about things that make me really uncomfortable, and I'm strange. I love it. I love to be
yeah. I
uncomfortable
was
and
going
be
to say, in a good way, I hope.
such a good way that I've talked to my husband, I've talked to my kids, and I'm like, "Oh my gosh, I want to change this." And I've made that decision. So I appreciate you, and appreciate you being on here and being so vulnerable and raw, and just thank you.
Thank you for being my new friend.
Absolutely. This is so fun.
I
It
know it
doesn't
is.
seem like people can really do this, and it is, and we're meeting and we're having a blast. So thank you, and just
Yeah.
have the very best day, and we'll talk soon, okay?
All right. Thank you.
Okay. See
Bye.
ya.